Okay, so welcome to our session this afternoon. We are going to be talking about seamlessaccess.org, about how we're trying to deliver a simpler, more privacy preserving access experience. We welcome your questions, so feel free to stay after the session if we don't get enough time to get to your questions. We're primarily here to answer questions, and we're going to take about 25 to 30 minutes in talking and then turn it over to you. Our speakers today at the far end is Emily Singley, who is Head Librarian Systems and Applications at Boston College. My colleague next to me is John Phelps, who's Head of Library Technology and Systems at the Kimball Library, Coastal Carolina University. I'm Tim Lloyd. I run a business called Livlinks that specializes in identity and access for publishers and libraries. We're all also members of the Outreach Committee for simplified. And let's do this. So, I'm going to start by briefly recapping the access issues that led to the creation of Seamless Access. Why did we get here? I'm going to spend more time showing you a demo of how we're planning to simplify access. So we're actually going to walk you through a live one. And then we're going to get to data privacy and talk through those issues. So the majority of this session will be showing you what it looks like and talking about data privacy. The recap's really just because there's some background here that's useful. How many of you have heard of Re21? Okay. How many of you think you know what Re21 is? Okay, pretty good. Right, so that's probably worth a recap then. I'm going to share this session with John. So I'm going to do a previously seen on 2 slides, pretty quick run through what Re21 was and why did we get here. John's going to talk about why is this important, and why seamless access. I'm going to run through the what, who, and when, and then we're going to get to the really interesting stuff. So, the Resource Access in the 21st Century project, or Re21, was initiated in 2016, initially to explore the challenges of remote access. It involved stakeholders from the publishing industry, library, software, identity communities. It took input from over 60 organizations over 3 years. And this identified that Federated Identity Management, Shibboleth is an open source software for Federated Access management, held the most promise for providing a robust, scalable solution for remote access to scholarly content. So as well as doing that identification, what Re21 also did was investigate some of the barriers to take up, and that's what we'll be showing you, developing some best practice ideas and piloting technical approaches to simplifying access. So what happened with that? Well, we published the conclusions of that project as a draft NISO recommended practice in April of this year. We had over 200 comments on that. That's a lot. There's a lot of interest in this area. So what that did was, one, helped identify further areas of investigation for us, and secondly, confirm the value of testing a beta service in practice so we can actually see how does this really work. The final NISO recommended practice was published in June 2019. Under the brevity challenging name of Recommended Practices for Improved Access to Institutionally Provided Information Resources, results from the Resource Access in the 21st Century Re21 project, which you can say without breathing, run pretty quickly. So that is the recap. Now I'm going to pass it over to John to just reiterate why is this important. Would you need to see this? No. Great. Is that okay? Okay. Well, why in the world are we here? I've heard a lot of questions, and rightly so. Why do we need this? What is this? Is this a solution looking for a problem? This Re21 and Coalition for Seamless Access? We use Easy Proxy. It only costs us $495 a year, and it works just fine. So what's up with this? In a nutshell, IP recognition has been around for a while, since the 70s. And library use of IP recognition, we started using that when off-site access to library resources was just in its infancy. So, and we've really changed it very little since then, in all fairness. So, it really wasn't designed for remote access, but I'll tell on myself, and I was around when we were struggling with providing remote access some 20 plus years ago in librarianship. And prior to that, we had to, if you were trying to run your own proxy server, well, that was a challenge in and of itself, but then you had to educate and support your users to remind them that
hey, you need to plug in this proxy URL to the physical configuration of your browser to get to library resources. And then even more challenging was you need to remember to take that back out if you want to get back out into the open web. So I remember the challenges with that. And when Chris Zagar came along and with this lightweight easy proxy solution for IP authentication, I mean, it was a godsend. And we rejoiced because it so simplified things. But you know, after 20 years of this, I think we can do a better job. And I think what Seamless Access hopes to do is, first and foremost, we want to provide improve remote access scenarios. I mean, we want to provide the user with a better user experience, right? Certainly there's been a considerable increase in off-campus access to library resources from a multitude of platforms. You know, gone are the days when somebody sits at their desktop in the library and accesses these resources. And two, from a user perspective, I mean, with IP authentication, we either work from the premise that researchers start their research from the library website, or no matter where else they start, they have to loop back around through the library website to pick up that proxy prefixed link. And I think we can all agree that that's not how users use, and that's not how researchers research anymore. It's just not a thing. It's certainly sites like Google Scholar, just for one example. And two, I think we want to improve usability. You know, current issues include, but certainly not limited to, numerous clicks to get beyond the paywall, to get to licensed resources that they're rightly entitled to. Numerous user credentials scattered over a multitude of websites. I can't keep track of mine, and I got them everywhere. You know, and I'm supposed to do better. I'm a librarian, you know. And two, and I'm not picking on any of my brothers and sisters. This is just one example of the image to your right there. But if we provide choices, for instance, some libraries and institutions are using VPN for clients, or you know, some SAML-based approach, like, you know, using Shibboleth and or easy proxy, then the user is immediately bombarded with confusing information about, well, what's best for me and how do I get this set up, and just, you know, from my own experience, and I'm sure from yours too, I mean, we provide all this information to our users and it's just ignored 99% of the time anyway, because it's just too much. So I think we really want to provide an environment that streamlines this approach. And two, and I'm sure none of us sitting here intend this, but by creating a more complicated user experience, we're implicitly pushing our users to use alternative resources like Sci-Hub or ResearchGate or something like that. And sorry, I got an audience right up in my face here. So, and I know none of us want to encourage that directly or indirectly, but use is on the uptick in these resources. And a couple other things, I want to expound more on both of these points later, because they're important in their own right, but we want to consider personalized user experiences, And two, we want to enhance user privacy mechanisms. I'll get more into these in more detail just a little bit later. And I think there's sort of a misconception out there that IP authentication is more privacy preserving than federated identity management, and it's really not. To simplify, this is a gross simplification. I mean, it conflates, anybody that's looked at an easy proxy log file, you can see that it conflates the user information, the user ID, with the IP number, which in and of itself immediately tells you the physical location, and that right off the bat is a violation of the GDPR, because GDPR considers that personally identifiable information. There's two, and I won't get into the weeds on this either, but most libraries still use some type of URL rewriting mechanism like Easy Proxy or WAM, those types of things. And these have security vulnerabilities. There's IP spoofing and man-in-the-middle attacks, clickjacking, session hijacking. There's all kinds of inherent problems with this mechanism. And two, and this is sort of like been a showstopper for me, and really compelled me to thinking that we should be able to do a better job was if one user is identified as a bad actor or their account is compromised, then we typically, the vendor will shut off access to the entire IP range, to the entire institution, because that's just the way IP authentication does. And at least block it to wherever your easy proxy resides, and then if that's the case, it impedes or totally stops access across the institution for that particular resource. And to me, that's just kind of the showstopper. That's just not the way to do business. And if anybody's had that experience, and I'll tell them myself, it's happened 2 or 3 times in my career, that gets you at about a 10.5 on the old stress factor when that happens, because boy, the phone really starts ringing off the hook, you know, when that goes down. With sample-based approach, then you can actually address this from the single user account versus the entire IP range of all of your users. And two, I guess somewhat of a mea culpa moment for me is, you know, I've set up hundreds, if not thousands, of these resources using Easy Proxy along the way, and I've always been adding our IP ranges to the vendors and our publisher sites, but it never really dawned on me if we stopped licensing a particular resource, I didn't loop back around and tell the vendor to remove our IP range. And this is just a little factoid that I picked up from Publisher Solutions International in 2017, probably more now, but I'll have to read this. On average, 58% of the IP ranges held by publishers to authenticate libraries who license their content are inaccurate. So, yeah, and anybody can pull up one of these in about 5 minutes. I was on Google for literally that, if not less, to see what I could find in terms of compromised user accounts, especially with Easy Proxy. And the image on, what's it, stage, how's it work? Stage left? Yes, thank you. Stage left, not the astute theater over here, is a web board. And this is really nice because, you know, once you log in, if you're looking for compromised user accounts, not only do you get that those credentials, but a lot of times they'll very conveniently give you the URL for your Easy Proxy configuration, which gives you that laundry list of all the resources that you provide access to. So it's really one-stop shop for those compromised user accounts and for users who are, or for folks out there that need access to this but aren't entitled to it. So I have nothing.
Okay, so I'm going to more rapidly run through, you know, some basic facts on seamless access, and then we'll get to the interesting stuff. So what is seamless access? So we're a community-driven effort to enable seamless access to information resources, scholarly collaboration tools, and shared research infrastructure. To date, we have 5 founding organizations. So we've got the National Information Standards Organization, NISO. We've got GÉANT, which is a European research and education network that operates a service called EduGame. That connects more than 60 research and education networks around the world. Internet 2, so that's the US Research and Education Network. They operate the US Identity Federation in common, among many, many other activities. ORCID, which is a non-profit that provides researchers with a digital consistent identifier, and the International Association of STM Publishers. We're also actively in conversations with a number of library partners, so we can have someone on board that also represents officially the library community. So this is designed to be a broad church. And you know, think of seamless access as the operational successor to the Re21 project. And this is an organization that's designed to be a community effort that will take those recommendations, test them in a beta phase, and manage it going forward. Okay. So next, who are we? So we have none of us are full, we're all just volunteers, by the way, just to be clear. We have a full-time implementation team, including an experienced librarian technologist dedicated to library outreach. There's a governance committee with representatives from across the stakeholder groups. There's an outreach committee, including 6 institutional participants, and 2 of them are here. And as of this month, there's a new cross-industry working group exploring ways to improve the release of user attributes. I'll talk about that a bit later. That includes librarians. So I really wanted to underscore this issue of library involvement. You know, we're putting a lot of effort into this precisely because we care about this. So I just want to introduce some of my colleagues from the institutional side. In addition to Emily and John, we've got Lawrence Lopton, who's a systems librarian at the University of Bath in the UK, Tracy Tolliver, who's Director of Library IT at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, Jason Griffey, who was recently appointed as NISO's Director of Strategic Initiatives, following a variety of institutional roles, including Head of Library IT at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Rich Wenger, until very recently the e-resources systems manager at MIT Libraries. And last but not least, Josh Westerbeek, who's a library IT specialist at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. He's also a founder of a fascinating organization called FIM4L, Federated Access Management for Libraries. If you Google it, there's lots more information about that group, and they advocate for better practices around federated identity management. So we're very serious about engaging with the library community. Lastly, when is seamless access? So this is just a very simplistic overarching timeline for our activities to date. So as I mentioned, the Re21 project developed and piloted ideas from the end of 2016 to June this year, and it wrapped up. Seamless access is now in the process of testing those ideas in the light of community feedback. We're developing best practices around the use of federated identity management. This beta phase is expected to run until June next year, and then from July, we're planning to have the service fully operational. And just to be clear, when I say the service, what I'm talking about, and what Emily will show you, is we're trying to solve a particular problem. And I realize this is some context that's just important to understand. So seamless access is doing a variety of things. There's a central service, but there's also developing best practices and policies around the use of federated identity management generally that will help you when you're dealing with vendors, your institutions. The central service is specifically trying to solve one problem. And do you talk about that in your section? The problem is great. So, over to you. No, sorry.
Yeah. All right, thanks for that setup. That was great. So now I'm going to show you what seamless access actually looks like. That's if everything goes well. So hopefully no technical glitches. So I'm going to show you, walk you through the actual user experience of seamless access. Before I do that, I want to spend just a couple of minutes really quickly going over what federated access looks like now and why there's issues with it. So federated access or federated identity management is already available on many library vendor platforms. You have probably experienced it. If you haven't, your users may have. This is the access point that users experience when they go directly to a vendor platform. And I have two screenshots here. The bottom one is HathiTrust. You may recognize that. On the top is American Chemical Society. And this access may be labeled something like Find My Institution or Institutional Login. It's also just labeled Login or lots and lots of other things. Users, when they encounter this, are able to use their standard institutional credentials that they're familiar with to go in and log in and get full access to resources if you're licensed with that platform. If your institution participates in an academic federation, like InCommon here in the United States, and sometimes you'll hear these called shibboleth. Shibboleth is a tool, but librarians and IT staff use these interchangeably. You may already have this set up at your institution. So one of the problems that seamless access is trying to solve is that the placement, as I just mentioned, of this login and the way it's presented is very inconsistent, and our users don't really recognize it as something that they understand or know how to use. And I've got 3 examples here of what this looks like. Wiley and Springer both have a kind of upper right login, which, that's fairly understandable, but you might not know it's an institutional login. This other one from Elsevier is a pop-up that sometimes comes up, at least in my Elsevier. And if you can see, very small letters at the bottom, it says you can also sign in via your institution, but it's really, really, really tiny. If they figure out where to click, there's more challenges as they try and navigate through the authentication experience, and it can also be very inconsistently implemented across different vendor platforms. So I've got 2 examples here. Wiley, and again, this is the way it looks in my system. Your system may differ depending on what federations you belong to, etc. But you'll notice, I don't know if you can see this, but there's actually, first of all, the user needs to know the name of a federation. How many people in this room even know the name of their federation? And then the name of my federation is that they are presented twice. I have no idea why. One, it says US in common, and a little bit lower down it says US higher education in common. I don't know which one of those to click. The Elsevier one, where you see that I've got 3 Boston colleges that come up when I put my institution name in, that's actually a Boston College problem. We're going to encounter that later. But it's also a problem that there's nothing to differentiate which Boston College. It doesn't say anything more about it for me to know which one that I need. And there's actually Boston College in the UK. So that just gives you a brief look at why seamless access is important and why we need some sort of standards, best practices, and tools around this that make this a more consistent user experience. So now we're going to be really bold and we're going to try a live demo. This is not, I think you saw on the timeline that this is not operational yet. So this is a demo that was has been created for this, not for this, but for talks like these, and sometimes it works. Oh, you know what? Now I have to get it over there. Do you know how to drag?
There's a button here.
We didn't think about that.
It doesn't.
Oh wait, no. Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Holy cow. Okay. All right. All right. So thank you. So what this demo is going to demonstrate is a user pathway that we're all familiar with, where a user starts on a search engine, in this case Google Scholar, and they navigate to a bunch of different resources. I have 3 resources up here from 3 different platforms, from 3 different vendors. And we're going to go and we're going to try and see what happens when I click on these. So let's just click on the first one. I hope you're all chemists, by the way. Ooh, that was actually super fast. Okay, sometimes this takes a while to come up. And I do want to say this is a demo, again, and the response time is slow. Now what you notice here is, unlike when you go to the regular ACS site, there's now a big old blue button in the middle with a logo on it that says access through your institution. Very user-friendly language. And that is the seamless access tool that we're talking about, okay? There's also the login at the upper right, that's there too, but access to your institution is now very easy to understand. I'm going to click on this, and this does take time. Oh, that's actually faster. Good internet here. So now, again, this is kind of easier to understand. As I type, whoops, if I type it correctly, I get the suggest as you type, which we all know and love. This is the Boston College problem. I still have too many Boston colleges. Okay, this is a problem with how we're set up right now. But at least I've got context. You notice the context that was missing before is here now, so I've got, I'm not going to do the one that's in the UK. I can see that's not me. I'm going to hope this is the right one. No. Okay. Sorry, that's the wrong word. Just kind of messed up here. If I do get the wrong institution, which I just did, I can try it again. College. It's a little bit slow this time. Come on. Okay. And this is something that I know and love and we're all familiar with, right? One of the issues with Easy Proxy, if you're not sending it through your university's IDP, is you may be using the Easy Proxy login. This is my university's identity management provider, and it looks the same across all my campus systems, so all of our users are very familiar with this and know what to do. So this is my SAML login, just like any other SAML system that's happening now. And now what I've got is, oops. It's going to get me to the full text. Very, very slowly. There it is. Okay. So you understand what I did. I just went to a button that I understood and got straight through to the PDF through an institutional login that I understood. Now the cool part about seamless access is I'm going to go back to my Google Scholar search and go to a different vendor. Let's just take Taylor & Francis. And you can, this is Royal Society of Chemistry, sorry. And you can see the same button. Now you'll notice the vendors have the ability to customize it a little bit. So the button's in a different place here, and it's a different color, so they're able to, do their color scheme. But the button's the same size, it's got the same logo, it's got the same language. And what you'll notice is because I'm in the same session, I don't have to do that whole login thing again, I only have to do it once. It remembers that I'm Boston College. As a matter of fact, when I was practicing this in my hotel room, I had a really hard time getting Boston College to go away. You really have to clear everything out to make it go away. So that's how that works, and I think that's pretty much it.
So I would say the first
Oh.
is
Get back. I'm just gonna,
I got slides.
yeah, this is mine. Oops. There you go.
So just to give a little more context on what you're seeing there, part of the best practices that we're developing is also around the data that you or institutions provide to the federations, because those lists, those pick lists are drawn from federation data. So for example, if your data is good and clean, then you get less multiple confusing lists. Other examples are providing logos. So there's actually, in the standards, there's ways for institutions to provide a logo that the seamless access says can then use to display next to those names. So there's lots of visual clues and cues that we can use to make that process simpler. But they don't exist yet. So although we've got sort of technology, some of the metadata to supply this isn't available yet. So that will get better over time. Okay, so this last part of data privacy is going to come in two parts. I'm going to provide a brief technical background on how user data is shared in federated identity management, and this is purely because it will give you some understanding of some of the terms that we'll then be talking about. And then John will talk about how the plan service protects privacy, policies around data privacy, and what libraries need to know, and then it's over to you. So, in federated identity management, attributes represent extra data about an authenticated user. An attribute release is the process by which that data is shared as part of the sign-in process by an identity provider, IDP, such as your institutions, a service provider, or SP, like a publisher. The format that attribute takes depends on the underlying technology. So, for example, most of you have probably heard of SAML, that's the technology that underpins Shibboleth and Open Athens, but there are other technologies you can use to support federated identity management, such as OpenID Connect, which is used by Facebook and Google. So, what are attributes? Give me some examples of them. So here you go. On the top line, you can just have an anonymous token. So it's uniquely generated for every login and for every service provider, regardless of whether the user is new or returning. So this token can't be used to support personalization because it changes every time the user signs in, so it retains user anonymity. That's the sort of most basic level. You can provide a pseudonymous identifier, so that's unique to each person and for each service provider. So it's like when I wear the same Halloween costume when I go to Taylor & Francis, and I wear a different Halloween costume all the time I go to programs. So it masks your user's true identities, but it does enable that user to be identified by the same service provider the next time they visit. But it can't be used to build a pattern of usage across service providers. So this can be used to personalize the user's experience. No credentials being passed over to the vendor. There's a variety of organizational data fields that can be provided where necessary. such as the user's home organization, their entitlements, rights, role, department, location. And there's obviously also personal data fields. So why are they important? Well, essentially, they give both sides of the transaction more control. And here's some examples of the sort of control that's of interest to you as libraries. So access control. So a library could choose to make a resource available only to users who are students, as recorded in your directory, and prevent, say, alumni or contractors from accessing. Cost control. So a library could limit resource access to users with a certain role or from a certain department. And risk control. So pseudonymous IDs allow users to benefit from personalization without exposing them to the risks and hassle of separately registering yet another username and password with a publisher. So the service provider can recognize a returning pseudonymous ID, personalize that user's experience accordingly without receiving any personally identifiable information, without needing to store their email address, without asking for a password. How does it work? So attribute release is optional. Your institutions can simply assert that a user is a member of your institution and leave it at that. Pages are out of order. You know what happens when you start reading a book and you say you're writing the wrong part? Attribute release only happens after a user is authenticated. So if the authentication is successful, nothing gets passed. And the service provider can't pull these attributes. They only get what your institutions choose to send them. The way attribute release is configured is for classes or categories of user. So your IT departments aren't going into a profile for every single one of the possibly hundreds of organizations they may interact with and configure them individually as categories. And library resource access is only one of a number of valuable categories that could be used for federated identity management. So some other examples, just so you're aware, is research collaborations. So that's where academics are working with colleagues from other institutions. In those cases, they may be sharing opinions and research and articles. And in that scenario, it's perfectly appropriate for them to share maybe a name and an email address. It's a different type of scenario. So there might be a configuration that releases more data. Another example might be using federated identity management with non-library vendor services like payroll or communications tools. And again, more data may be shared there. So your IT department needs these configuration profiles so that when it's setting up a transaction, it knows what's the appropriate profile to apply. Right now, there's not a lot of guidance on that. And obviously, library resources have recommendations for a much more limited set of attributes, and that's what John will talk about shortly. And let's just look at some example use cases, because it's sometimes helpful to talk about scenarios that mirror what you might actually encounter in the real world. So in the first scenario, we've got users who are accessing full text articles on a platform where there is no option for personalization. So all they simply need to confirm is that they're members of your organization, and an anonymous token is fine. Nothing more is needed. Scenario 2 could be users are getting content recommendations in the user interface based on their prior search history. So to make that possible, the publisher needs to be able to recognize that you come back and the last time you searched for X. So a pseudonymous identifier would do this. Again, no personally identifiable information is passed. They're just recognizing that this person last did this and now they come back. Scenario 3, let's say that there's a special feature that's only available to certain users in your organization. So in this case, the example is the ability to tap into prepaid funds to buy ebooks for a department. So the library might not want everyone to have access to this, maybe only faculty. So in this case, the attributes that could be passed could be a pseudonymous ID, plus maybe an attribute for the user's role, which might allow the service provider to say, okay, we're only going to switch this functionality on when we see certain roles, and otherwise we turn it off. And the last example is clinicians who are earning continuing education credits. They need to receive an email which provides documentation for credit they've got. So in that case, it could be a pseudonymous ID plus a user consent to pass over their email strictly for the purposes of sending them the credit information. So these are some examples of how you can configure these attributes to practice. And that is up to you. Thank you. You did that. Let's get back in the day. Okay.
I'm going to really plow through this because we don't have a lot of time left. We got a little bit of a late start due to technical difficulties, but I do want to hammer away at this concepts of security and privacy. So very briefly, one of the reasons I got involved with this initiative, outside of just my general interest in obviously technology and innovative technologies to provide access to library resources, I did have concerns about privacy and how is this initiative handling privacy, for our library patrons. So to that, Re21, this was about 18 months ago, they had a security and privacy working group, and it concluded a technical analysis of security and privacy risks using industry standard threat assessment models. This group was comprised of a variety of stakeholders from across the information spectrum. Kind of piggyback on what Tim was saying. It wasn't just a wink and a nod sort of, you publishers saying, yeah, it's okay, trust us. No, this was a broad spectrum of stakeholders, including library technologists, librarians, standards organizations, and certainly publishers and vendors. The results were for security when applying standard security and data protection practices, no significant risks were found. And for data privacy, a data protection impact assessment was performed compliant with EU's GDPR to determine if there were any high risks, and none were found. And the complete report, I've already uploaded our slides to the conference website. If you want to get into the weeds on that, then it's a pretty detailed, involved report that gets into the specifics. And again, to reiterate and hammer away at this privacy issue, because I understand as librarians, this is a primary concern for all of us. Recently, Re21 and by extension, Coalition for Seamless Access, we were mentioned in both Stanford Library's statement on patron privacy and the ARL comments on Re21, this proposal for access to licensed information resources. And I'm really happy that as librarians, this came out because, sometimes, if I may, over my career, I've seen librarians, sometimes we can sort of sit on the sidelines and watch these events transpire and then not be really satisfied with the results. So I'm really glad to see a more proactive approach and more proactive engagement to this initiative. To expound upon that a little bit, Re21 adopted the GEONT Data Protection Code of Conduct. Okay, I'm going to really go fast now. It provides specific guidance to the service providers on how they should handle personal data in the context of federated identification, or authentication, I'm sorry. And again, that link is on our slides as well, and you can take a look at that as well. It's only about 3 pages, and it's a really easy read, so it's not that complicated. It doesn't get into 50 pages and all kinds of stuff. So I've broken it down into 4 fundamental principles. I've tried to water those down a little bit, but those 4 points basically indicate, and this is to our service providers, our vendors, and our publishers. You can only use attributes necessary for access, use as little data as possible, wherever possible. Don't do anything with this data except provide access. Don't sell it to anybody or use it for great marketing strategies or anything. And then to delete or anonymize this data when it's no longer needed. So I think this GEONT Code of Conduct aligns closely with Article 3 of the ALA Code of Ethics. And lastly, considerations for librarians. I can say it really fast, is let's all get involved, there's a minimalist approach where it's just only use the amount of data you need to create access, and then we can swing to the other side of the spectrum where it's like, heck no, we got to use as much data as possible because we want to plug into that concept of and show evidence that library use equals student success. And I get all that. Probably the answer is somewhere in the middle of those 2 ends of the spectrum, but it's really up to the institution what kind of balance they want to strike in releasing these attributes, and the balance between user privacy and more robust services. Importantly, to help libraries understand how to manage attribute release, with our vendors and publishers, Seamless Access is going to be starting a working group very soon. Look at your listservs for this, and it will be dedicated to generating usable contract language. to speak to attribute release policies, assurances that these policies are being adhered to, and ultimately provide libraries with templates that we can use and reuse, repurpose as needed, so that we can ensure that personally identifiable information is not being shared inappropriately. And two, Seamless Access is working on standardized attribute release policies as well to help all libraries in going forth with this venture and doing it in a smart way. So if libraries want to consider generating more granular data, that could be one use case scenario. If libraries want to target that agreements and that type of thing. So that's a work in progress, more to come on that. And two, about personalization, I understand there's a certain little bit of an X factor there around that because there's concerns around, releasing all that user information. But, and again, it's up to the institution how to approach this, but we can give users the ability to say data and articles, advanced search queries, compile references across different platforms, and libraries could customize their user's experience based on their demographics, their interests, their major, and all that stuff. We've been dancing around that as librarians for a long time. In the early 2000s, we were looking at that My Library portal concept, so this is an opportunity for us there. So I think, lastly, it's really important for librarians, to piggyback on what Tim said earlier, there's ample opportunities for all of us to get involved with this initiative. This isn't being foisted upon us by some publishers or vendors or some malignant evil empire or something like that. We're all working in consort together. And the three of us aren't shills for the publishing industry. I did not get my check this month, so my kickback check. So I guess to summarize quickly is, let's all get involved and do this together.
So I'm sorry, we did a terrible job managing our time. I apologise. We've run over, but we are happy to stay here and answer whatever questions you've got. So if you want to go or need to go, feel free. Seamlessaccess.org has more information, and you're welcome to contact any of the three of us about getting involved if you want to get involved in any way.